Ever notice how 20 minutes into a deep work session, your brain, it literally starts begging you to check Slack? I ran an autopsy on that feeling, and the evidence shows it's not laziness, it's a neurochemical trap. I'm investigating why your high performance ambitions are being hijacked by your own biology, and why that itch to check your phone is actually a clue to a much deeper physiological conflict. You know the scene, right? You sit down, phone flipped over, noise-canceling headphones on. You've told yourself this is the hour you finally tackle that strategy deck. But right as you start gaining momentum, it hits you. A sudden, unexplained restlessness. It's almost like a physical phantom pain. Your mind starts generating urgent errands. You suddenly remember you need to check the weather, or your bank balance, or, that one specific thread on LinkedIn. This is what I call the 20-minute focus failure. Most of us think this is a character flaw. We tell ourselves we're just not disciplined enough. But when I look at the data under the microscope, I see something different. I see a brain that is literally struggling to maintain its neurochemical baseline. You see, your brain is a cognitive miser. It wants to save energy at all costs. When you push into deep, concentrated effort, you're demanding a massive amount of glucose and oxygen for your prefrontal cortex. But your limbic system, the older, more impulsive part of your brain, sees this high energy expenditure as a risk. It wants the easy hit. It wants the cheap dopamine of a notification to balance the pain of cognitive strain. I'm looking at this like a detective examining a crime scene. The itch isn't an accident. It's a defensive maneuver. Your biology is trying to hijack your focus because it perceives deep work as a threat to your comfort. If you've ever wondered why staying focused feels like a physical fight, it's because it is. You were caught in a physiological tug of war between the high-performing professional you want to be and the ancient survival-driven hardware you're actually running on. In this autopsy, we're going to find out exactly how to disarm that trap before it kills your productivity for good. I stepped back and looked at the evidence scattered across your digital workspace. The 50 open tabs, the half-written emails, and that lingering sense of guilt. You know the one. For years, I've seen high achievers like you blame themselves for this. You think you just need more willpower, a better planner, or perhaps just one more double shot espresso to bridge the gap. But as I analyze the data, I see a completely different story. This isn't a character flaw. It's a neurochemical crime scene, and we've been looking for the wrong suspect. You know that feeling I'm talking about, right? You finally carve out 90 minutes to start that deep work session, the project that actually moves the needle for your career. And within 5 minutes, your chest feels heavy. There's a literal physical resistance pushing back against your ribs. It feels like trying to run through waist-deep water. Most people misdiagnose this as boredom, or a sign that they're just not feeling it today. But I've realized that this is actually the moment your brain is undergoing a massive, painful chemical shift. When you transition from the shallow, dopamine-fueled world of scrolling and Slack into the deep focus required for high-level output, your brain doesn't just flip a switch. It has to overcome what I call cognitive friction. To focus, your brain must flood your system with noradrenaline, the chemical cousin of adrenaline. In high doses, noradrenaline signals stress, agitation, and even physical discomfort. It's literally your brain's way of saying, this is hard, this is demanding. Let's go back to something easy. This is why the first 20 minutes of deep work feel like a physical weight on your chest. You aren't failing at the basics of focus. You're just experiencing the high cost of entry for peak performance. I see so many brilliant professionals give up right here, at the peak of the friction, thinking they've hit a wall. In reality, they've just hit the gate. But here's the detail that most people miss, the clue that changes the entire investigation. As I analyzed the patterns of top-tier performers, I noticed a strange paradox. The very pain you're trying so hard to avoid might be the only reliable signal that you're actually doing it right. It leads me to wonder, is that burning sensation in your mind a sign that you should quit? Or is it the sound of your brain finally starting its most powerful engine? Because what happens at the 21-minute mark, that is where the real mystery begins. And it's something almost no one is prepared for. You see, when I dove into the forensic data behind these high-performance loops, I realized, well, we were looking at the wrong culprit. Slightly cynical. We often assume that the internal resistance we feel, that deep, visceral urge to check our phones or pivot to a less demanding task, is a lack of discipline. But that is a total misdiagnosis. My investigation points to a phenomenon I call limbic friction. Think of it as a tug of war happening inside your skull. On one side, you have your prefrontal cortex, the seat of your executive function, trying to steer you toward long-term goals. On the other, you have your amygdala, an ancient survival-obsessed structure that views sustained high-intensity focus as a threat to your energy reserves. When you push into that 90-minute window, you aren't just thinking. You are engaging in a physiological event. Your brain is essentially sensing that it's burning through fuel at an unsustainable rate, so your amygdala starts sounding the alarm, triggering that pain you feel, as a way to force you back into a state of comfort. But here is the breakthrough. That discomfort is not a sign that you are broken or incapable. It is a neurochemical byproduct of your brain rerouting energy. It is the literal burn of a cognitive muscle undergoing growth. I mean, we are effectively trying to rewire the motherboard while the system is still running. And that friction, that is the sound of the upgrade taking hold. However, there was one detail that almost everyone missed in their attempts to stay productive. It turns out how you interpret that friction changes the biological outcome entirely. But before we get to the specific way you can hack this resistance, we have to look at the even more disturbing reality of what happens when you decide to ignore the warning signs for too long. Because there is a specific, invisible threshold that separates a productive breakthrough from a total cognitive crash. And once you cross it, the data tells a very different story.
Look, to bypass this cognitive crash, you and I need to stop treating our brains like basic machines that can run indefinitely and start treating them like high-precision instruments. You see, we have to recalibrate. I've developed a 3-step tactical manual, a counterintelligence protocol, that essentially tricks your nervous system into maintaining flow without the usual physical toll. First, you need to implement the 10-minute on-ramp. Most of the friction you feel during deep work, the real resistance, comes from trying to sprint out of the gate while your prefrontal cortex is still cold. Instead of diving into your hardest task immediately, start with a low-stakes manual task. It could be drafting an email, organizing your file structure, or simply reviewing your notes. This lowers your initial cortical arousal, signaling to your brain that it's safe to gear up, rather than forcing it into an abrupt, painful spike of adrenaline. Second, consider the visual lockdown. Your eyes are the primary drivers of your state of alertness. When you're constantly darting your gaze around, your brain is processing massive amounts of environmental data, which drains your energy, right? Firmly, I want you to physically narrow your visual field to just your screen. By limiting your peripheral vision, you trigger a specific neurobiological response that forces the brain into a singular focus mode. It's a simple sensory hack, but it's remarkably effective at silencing the distractions your environment is trying to feed you. Finally, we hit the micro-break pivot. At exactly the 45-minute mark, when that familiar, nauseating pain of focus begins to peak, you have to stop. I don't mean check your phone, and I definitely don't mean switch tabs. You need 2 minutes of non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR. By closing your eyes and engaging in a brief, controlled breathing pattern, you effectively flush out the metabolic waste that creates that mental friction. It's the difference between pushing a stalled engine and giving it the fuel it actually needs to keep running. But there is a reason most people fail to sustain this, even when they know the steps. It's because of an invisible variable that triggers a subconscious sabotage, often right before you hit your greatest breakthrough.
I'll show you how to identify this exact moment of sabotage so you don't lose your momentum. But we have to talk about why your own nervous system is currently working against your goals. The reason your nervous system is fighting back isn't because you lack discipline. It's because your brain is a survival machine, not a productivity machine. You see, for thousands of years, your limbic system has been wired to conserve energy, not to solve complex problems for 8 hours a day. When you hit that 90-minute mark, your brain senses a drop in glucose and a spike in cognitive load, triggering a literal threat signal. It's trying to steer you towards safety, towards the easy, the known, and the low-effort task. But here is the forensic truth we've uncovered today. You aren't lazy. You're just experiencing the friction of growth. When you feel that sharp, restless pain in your chest, or the sudden overwhelming urge to check your phone, we've all been there, right? I want you to recognize it for exactly what it is. It is not a sign that you should stop. It is the physical evidence that you are winning the battle against your own limbic system. You are literally building new neural pathways in real time. And that construction work, it creates friction.
Think of this pain as the resistance you feel at the gym when you're pushing for that final rep. It's not an injury, it's a milestone. You are training your brain to tolerate high-intensity focus, which is the rarest currency in our modern economy. The investigation is clear. The high performers aren't the ones who don't feel that pain. They're just the ones who have learned to interpret it as a green light rather than a red one. Once you reframe that discomfort as a signal of high-level cognitive expansion, the sabotage stops and the momentum finally belongs to you. If you want to keep optimizing your neural architecture with me and stay ahead of the curve, make sure to join our investigative unit by subscribing to Power of Mindset. We're decoding the human operating system one session at a time. Curious, what was the exact moment you felt that resistance today? Let me know in the comments. Case closed for now.